So it looks like Mateus Gamrot is going to be stepping up to replace Rafael Fiziev at UFC Rio, facing Charles Oliveira. Now, this is a very interesting fight. I think it's going to be a little closer than people think. Gamrot is going to be coming in on short notice, but he is 4 in his last 5. His only loss is to Dan Hooker. Now, there are many questions to be answered about this, and the context is important. Obviously, Oliveira just has been brutally finished by Ilia Topuria. He lost a vacant lightweight title, and a lot of people are not exactly thinking he's done, but it's hard to see him in a place that he's going to climb to the very top of the division again, simply because it doesn't look like anyone is beating Topuria anytime soon. And Oliveira's been around for a while, and he hasn't really, there was the argument over his heart his entire career, whether he was willing to, go the distance, and he proved everyone wrong. And, by doing that, he got himself into some tough fights, against Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. He took a lot of hits. You get older, you get more chinny. It's just a fact of life. And after being cracked as bad as he was by Topuria, you really have to wonder what the state of his health is right now. To come back from injury like that this soon, I thought in the beginning was an awful idea. I thought that Fiziev was going to catch him. As we know, terrific striker, but now that he's out, a guy like Gamrot, who has really proven a couple times now, he should be in the conversation for the BMF. He is constantly willing to step up. He's active on social media when people who are talking about needing a replacement don't accept his fight. Santini is an example of that. Didn't want to fight him on short notice. Right now it's tough to see sort of a little bit of hypocrisy from Charles Oliveira, kind of mocking others, pulling out, and not making weight, and kind of trolling people who really aren't putting their best foot forward. But when a situation arises like this, where Gamrot, who is a legit top, I'd say 7 competitor, offers to step in, sort of belly aching about the whole situation and making it seem like you didn't really want to fight him, it once again doesn't put the greatest visual in your head coming into this fight. Oliveira saying that he was preparing for a striker, and now having to go and face a grappler is a legitimate take. But then again, you do have the most submissions in UFC history. That's kind of your whole thing. So to switch up last minute and say something along the lines of, oh, this is out of my comfort zone, dude, this is literally what you're known for, and I think it's a bad look. I think it's also a bad look for the division. Of course, getting injuries isn't really controllable, and for Fiziev it's unfortunate, but to have fights like this where we're still at least the media and a lot of sort of people who look at it just at face value are looking at Oliveira as still a top fighter in the division, looking to claw his way back to the title, and then you kind of take these short notice fights that are maybe not title eliminators, but getting you away from one fight to a title eliminator. It kind of takes away the credibility a little bit, and doesn't make the division look great. There's good up and coming talent, and I feel as if resources would be better spent promoting up and comers rather than throwing together fights like this. Now, that being said, this is a good fight, and we have to kind of look at the breakdown of it. So to remind ourselves, Oliveira, again, his last fight was Topuria in June. It's only a couple months ago. Brutally flatline KO'd. It did not look good. It was tough to watch. Now, on the other side, Gamrot comes off of general momentum with 4 wins in his last 5. He beat Ludwig Klein, Rafael dos Anjos, Rafael Fiziev, Jalen Turner. Now, some of those wins, the Jalen Turner win was a little controversial. Rafael Fiziev injured himself. Dos Anjos was old, and Ludwig Klein doesn't really seem to be a super elite competitor. And then, you face someone like Dan Hooker, who's been around for a long time, and this is sort of war Dan. We see a lot less technique from him now. Watching that fight back, obviously very entertaining, but to see, Gamrot got dropped by Hooker. I mean, it was clear the fight was close, and he did drop Hooker as well. It's two guys who seem to be pretty chinny. Not Dan Hooker, but Gamrot seems to be chinny. He always has been. He did get dropped by Dos Anjos. He struggles with guys who are power punchers. He seems to really go out on his feet a lot. And so I think this is an opportunity for Oliveira. Obviously we know his sort of berserker style of going forward. The heavy pressure could be a big challenge for Gamrot. Of course, the change in dynamics of the fight, he did say he wasn't preparing for a grappler. That being said, his level of jiu-jitsu should sort of make him hold his own. Altering the game plan last minute can mess with the mentals of a fighter. Oliveira has proven in his long win streak that he does seem to have grown the capability to be mentally strong coming into fights. His self-belief is stronger. It doesn't seem like he's giving up like he was years ago, facing guys like Cub Swanson, losing to Cowboy Cerrone. It's it's a different guy. But then again, we haven't really seen much of him since the knockout. So you have to wonder, how that affected him, not only physically, because we know he's not going to be the same, but also mentally. Getting put out like that is how do you look at yourself going into a fight being completely confident, especially against an elite competitor like Gamrot? Things that Oliveira, would need to do to win, and I think it's pretty obvious. It is avoid the dangerous striking exchanges. He will know to an extent how many shots he can take through things like sparring and training and drilling, but he's not going to know what it's like to really be in that situation until he's in there with Gamrot. Gamrot isn't known as a power puncher. And I think this will work to his advantage because, Fiziev has great Muay Thai, and his accuracy, has supplied him with finishes in the past. But I do think that, there is, Gamrot doesn't hit hard, but, he doesn't hit, completely, he doesn't have pillow hands. So to avoid the crazy striking exchanges early is going to be important. Now, do I think he can do that? Yes. Will he? I don't know. He might want to come out like he usually does, and if he does, risk it like he did against Gaethje, he might have a different result because, you don't know what his chin's going to look like now. For Gamrot, he's going to need to establish his wrestling early. Obviously, these really high-level jiu-jitsu guys, and Oliveira's included, are shut down by people with really good wrestling. Michael Chandler isn't really an argument for that, considering he throws away the game plan every time he goes in. But someone like Makhachev, who is able to put his pressure down early and make people carry his weight, jiu-jitsu guys are going to struggle with that. Oliveira, obviously, was finished by him. And, it may be the difference here. Now, of course, Gamrot's smaller than Makhachev, so that is going to play an advantage. Oliveira, has put on a huge amount of muscle in the past years, so that will also play to an advantage. The question is, how quick is he going to be once it goes to the ground? And, if Gamrot can avoid kind of getting entangled in submissions early, it's going to look great for him because breaking down Oliveira mentally is something that is possible. As we have seen less of it, but it definitely does seem to be possible. But if he can avoid the grappling or getting caught in a submission early, I think it's going to play into his hands later into the fight. He has great cardio and pace, and to be able to do that on a guy like Oliveira, who really is trying to snipe one big shot or a submission, is going to be difficult for him to overcome that. Now, with his entries, he's going to need to use safe entries and really kind of think on his feet. He doesn't want to get hit by Oliveira. He does hit hard. Gaethje said it was the hardest he's ever been hit, regardless of the context of whether he was healthy or not. It needs to be, a very thought-out game plan by Gamrot. He can't just go there and try to entertain. I know he wants to. He hasn't lived up really to the hype as he promised he would signing to the UFC. He's very good. He's an elite competitor, but I do not see him finishing the fight against Oliveira. I think if he really wants to, barring the fact that Oliveira's chin is completely gone, I see Gamrot having the game plan of trying to grind it out over 5 rounds and laying on him pretty much to try and get the decision. Wrestling works against jiu-jitsu guys like this, but it needs to be smart, and you need to make them carry your weight. Can Gamrot do that with the relative size discrepancy? We will see. But he is going to need to avoid the crazy striking exchanges that Oliveira will face him with. It is clear to see it's clear to see Oliveira's evolution in his game plan over the year has been much more aggressive. And I am banking on the fact that his chin is still there. I don't think that one knockout is going to make him sort of go to sleep, by a simple touch, especially against a guy like Gamrot. I was much more nervous against someone like Fiziev, but, Oliveira can mix up his striking on the feet, and the clinch is going to be important, especially if Gamrot tries to wrestle. And if he can dominate those rounds and hurt him early with, big exchanges that he's going to need to force, then I think I can see him getting the finish. So the two likely scenarios that I see right now is either Mateus Gamrot by unanimous decision or Charles Oliveira by finish. History has sort of pointed us to Oliveira being able to find the finish, especially against elite competitors. I mean, you look back to Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler, all guys who hit really hard and are big guys, bigger than Gamrot, and he was able to weather the storm and find the finish, and really only losing to the top competition, into Poirier and Makhachev. And I don't think that Mateus Gamrot is at that level, and I think that Oliveira will find the finish. In the first 3 rounds, I wouldn't be surprised. Now all this being said, this doesn't look great for the lightweight division. As I said earlier, it really takes away the legitimacy of sort of these quote-unquote up-and-coming prospects, because if they're just going to keep recycling the same guys for viewership, then what happens when they're all fighting each other, and a big fight is hyped up, and someone pulls out like this, and there's really no guys that they've brought up quickly enough or have spent enough in marketing on to put in that position. So I think Fiziev's withdrawal has a big impact on this fight. I think Mateus Gamrot has a great mentality in stepping up. He is, he's a guy who the UFC can lean on to keep these big superstars in fights like Oliveira, which is what they need right now. As viewership drops and big fights like these are needed, it's important to keep them on. It's important to keep and to enjoy a guy like Oliveira while he's still around. That being said, I really don't think it does much for the division, and I think that this does affect other divisions as well. Like lightweight for a long time was really touted as one of the most kind of hard divisions to win in and win the championship, and now you have incredible talent right at the very, very top with Makhachev and Topuria. Oliveira is very exciting, but he's old. Gaethje only has 1 or 2 left in him. Dan Hooker is unfortunately on the way out as well. These guys who have been around for a while, and have kept the division relevant for a very long time, are really starting to die out, and it's sad to see, and they need to make a change quickly. They need to find guys who are willing to be like Gamrot anytime, anywhere, any place, and it's going to help the division. Looking to another division like featherweight, Diego Lopes was ready to step up, and after a huge win over Jean Silva, it is exactly what the UFC needs to build a superstar. Now, I think the argument around building a superstar it's very difficult, and you can't manufacture it. It's got to be someone who shows up and does it themselves. And I think if anyone's trying to really get to the level where they are the face of the UFC, someone like Adesanya or McGregor or Usman for a little while, just recent names, you need to be able to throw your hat into the mix, and you need to be given the opportunities as well. Diego Lopes looked more than ready to step in, and honestly, regardless of the size discrepancy, it would have been a fantastic fight. I would have loved to see that a lot more than Gamrot versus Oliveira. It just keeps sort of the state of the sport a little more legitimate, and it really makes for exciting TV, which is half of it, the promotion. But for now, it's exciting to see Oliveira staying on the card. I'm excited to see how he responds to his latest loss. I think he's going to get it done. I don't think Gamrot's going to have enough time to formulate a good enough game plan to keep Oliveira on his back for 5 rounds. But that being said, there's a lot of unpredictability. So very exciting to see, and thank you all for watching.